those questions. I said,
Good afternoon.
why he answered
I want
them.
to welcome
couldn't.
everyone to our City Board of Directors agenda meeting where we will set the agenda for the October 27th, November 2nd agenda that's coming up. We also like to welcome Directors Hendricks, Richardson, Webb, Fordson, who are all with us via video conferencing, and those that are watching via online and live streaming. So thank you so much. We have one modification for tonight's agenda, which is the extension of the South on Main or South District, South Main District, who we often call the SOMA, to extend their temporary entertainment district. We'll be making that addition to that agenda from the previous. Are there any questions for items 1 through 12?
I have a question.
I have a question on item 7.
Item 7. Vice Mayor Wyrick, then Director Wright.
I just would like a report on item 2. It talks about a variance from the 100-year floodplain, and that's kind of always scary to me, so if someone could let us know what that's about.
Item 2.
Item 2, yeah.
Director Collins or Director Honeywell, you'll handle that one. We're just, for those watching, we're just doing some finishing touches. Director Honeywell.
Good evening. Vice Mayor Wyrick, item number 2 is a variance for our floodplain ordinance for a development that occurred on Rodney Parham.
Right.
It's just, I guess that's north of the intersection with 12th Street. It's a development that when it came through the building permit process, the flood elevations for that particular piece of property were at 1 level. During the process between they got their building permit and we reviewed it so it was in compliance with the 1-foot freeboard requirement, their finished floor elevation of the building has to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation.
Right.
So when they submitted for the building permit, they were in compliance with that. In the time between they started building their building and when they completed it to get their certificate of occupancy, new floodplain maps were developed and accepted by the city. And that changed that floodplain elevation by a few inches. So now their finished floor elevation is actually less than 1 foot over the base flood elevation. They're still above the base flood elevation. It's just not within that 1 foot requirement. And that's what we're asking for the variance. It's not something that the developer did. It's something that occurred in between the time that they started and when they completed.
So do we have any repercussions from allowing them to do that? Does that have any impact on the city at all?
It does not.
Okay, I know sometimes if we do that, there is a issue for us, and so that's what I was trying to understand. So they have to have flood insurance for the building?
It is actually built above that base flood elevation, so I do not believe they're required to have it. They can have it if they wish, but they're not required to since it's above the base flood elevation.
So if it floods, there's not an issue with the city at all? That's their responsibility to handle?
It would be their private property, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So do they have to sign any sort of agreement saying that the city's not responsible? If they do flood or if there are issues with their property?
I don't believe there's an agreement that's signed with that. That is part of their private property in the first place. It's not something that the city has, we've said that you're above the base flood elevation. It's just that 1 foot freeboard that cushion of 1 foot is what they're asking for the variance from. So there's no, that I'm aware of, any documentation that's signed regarding that.
Okay, well, coming from some areas in Southwest where we have issues with that, you know, there have been some repercussions over time, so I just wanted to get a clarification. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. You're welcome.
John,
Director Wright?
I believe that is Ward 6. Did
Yes, ma'am, it is.
the construction that was done in that area cause this discrepancy?
No, ma'am. It was actually a restudy of that entire reach of that creek, and that's what they adjusted base flood elevations based on a new engineering study of that creek, and that's what changed this elevation. It had no bearing. This project was constructed in a way it fell within all the requirements of what they had to have done, regardless of whether or not the base flood elevation changed.
Okay, I had a sense of deja vu because if you remember the Big Rock interchange,
Yes, ma'am.
I recall that even though the state designed and built that, we were liable
Yes,
for
ma'am.
what happened on those people's property right there at the Kirk something Plaza, right there.
Yeah, and that was something that actually was built out in the floodway. So it's a little different scenario than what we're talking about here. This was property that was already previously developed, and they've redeveloped it. So it's a little different than the scenario you were talking about before, where they were actually doing something that affected the floodway with their construction. This construction did not impact that elevation because of the actual building that they did.
Well, let's hope that that's all remembered if they flood and they try to come back and sue us.
Well, and their building is still above the base flood elevation. So that I want to emphasize that. It's still meeting the requirements of being out of the flood depth or height. It's just they're not a full 1 foot above it, which is what our ordinance requires.
I understood that part. It just felt a little bit like deja vu.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, especially, you know, when I saw that 900, it reminded me of that amount. Okay. Mayor, I had a question about resolution number 7. I'd like a presentation on that and 10.
Mayor,
Yes, Director Hendricks.
I need to ask about number 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And what I'm really wanting is that if Mr. Moore would send to me number 7, 10, and 11, information about it. You know, just seeing this and not knowing what we're talking about. And
Yeah.
on 5, if that could be for 2021, maybe. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We'll first have the presentation, 7 and 10. Then we'll move with Director Hendricks, as well as Director Webb. Which ones would you like to see? I notice.
I have a quick question for the city manager on number, I'm sorry, the city attorney on number 8.
On number 8, we'll
Yes,
since it's a quick question, we'll indulge that real quick before the presentation.
I'm on the board of Jericho Waste Care Organization, and although these are from general funds, I just wanted to know if to remember to recuse myself next week.
Right. And Director Webb, we looked at this last year. I do not believe that you have to. You don't have an interest in it, nor are you paid for being on their board. But I will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Howard, I think you're going to speak to 7 and 10.
I can speak to 7, Mayor.
7, that's correct, I'm sorry.
Also 9.
I think I have 5, 6, 7, and 8, and 9.
Well, let's just start from there.
Okay.
'Cause I think that intersects with some of Director Hendricks.
Okay, I'll start with 5.
So Director Hendricks, and so everyone's aware, and Director Wright, Director Howard is going to go through 5, 6, 7, and 9. All right. And we've already answered number 8 for Director Webb.
That's correct. Director Hendricks, Resolution 5 is a land bank transfer application that was made by Mr. Lemons for the property located at 2021 South Maple Street. His offer was $6,000. It was accepted by the Land Bank Commission. We didn't have any nays against the application. And it's for a single-family residence that's around 1,184 square feet, single family. Number 6, this is to authorize the city manager to enter, to actually submit our COM plan. We're doing an amendment to the consolidated plan for the funding that we receive award on for the Cdbg Cv3 funds, and this comes from the CARES Act. And the amount of the award was $1,016,477. And this is for public services and tenant-based rental assistance. Number 7 is to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Western Economic Services. And this is for our 2021-2025 5-year consolidated plan. And this is required for us to complete to submit funding from HUD for the next 5 years.
Kevin, would you explain the process that you all are going to undergo, or what will this entity be doing with our communities?
Yeah, so this entity would, is a consultant, and they'll go out and complete surveys through citizens throughout the city, and we'll do analysis of impediments to fair housing. And this is considered, we have to do this all throughout the city. We'll have 5 public meetings where citizens can provide their input for our consolidated plan to undergo studies and surveys to make sure that we have each citizen input so we can make sure that we doesn't have any analysis of impediments to fair housing.
Okay, well, you know we're going to be severely limited with our outreach with regards to facilities since they're closed.
Yes, and we'll do this. We'll have virtual meetings too, and we'll make sure that we make sure it's available to the general public. We'll have the actual link that they can log in to each meeting through WebEx, so we can make sure citizens will be informed. We'll make sure we do a PSA too as well.
Okay, thank you.
Number 9 is to allow the city manager to enter into a contract with World Services for the Blind. This is funding that we receive from the State Department of Human Services. This is for our Emergency Solutions Grant. We receive funding around $560,000 under the COVID funding grant that we put out an RFP for. And so World Services for the Blind was one of the respondents.
Question. I'm looking at the one above it. DePaul, is that the one where the van picks up the people on the corners? That's not that one? Okay, that was Jericho Way. Okay, thank you.
Mayor.
And DePaul USA was one of the respondents for ESG too as well. And they'll be receiving the component on the street outreach.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
We got a follow-up from Vice Mayor Wyrick on number 6.
Okay.
I'm trying to pull it back up. I believe it says that there's $250,000 in there for economic development. How does one get involved in getting money from that $250,000?
So initially, we came before the board when we first received our first round of CARES Act funding under CDBG, and we put out a NOFA, and we also requested funding. Well, we received funding from the federal government under CDBG Cv3 or Cv1, and so those funds that we received, we put out a public service announcement to allow small businesses to apply. We put out $5,000 for each small business. We had a small business emergency assistance program that we put out about, I want to say it was back in June. And so we've had over, we spent over $200,000 to date to small businesses so far.
Okay, so that $250,000 is already, it's already been utilized.
That's correct.
Okay, well, I think you said 200,000, so maybe.
We're a little over 200,000. We have a few more that we have in the pipeline that's pending right now that have to get information, but we provided that information to those small businesses, so we're just waiting on them to send that information back in so we can get them approved.
Is there any way we can get a list of
Yes.
who's
Yes.
getting that who's getting that money?
Yes, we can provide that
Okay.
information.
So are you saying that everything in this package that we've got listed, it's all been applied for and it's, no?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay.
So initially, we received two sources of funding. Initially, we received around 879,000 that you all voted on. We did amendment, I want to say back in May or June, we did amendment. That was the first substantial amendment we did, because we have, every time we receive funding from the federal government, we have to do an amendment. The first amendment we did included community development block grant funds, and then the other amount of the funding that we received was HOPWA, Housing Opportunity Persons with AIDS, and we did tenant-based rental assistance on that. We did public services, and we did a small business emergency assistance program with the first funding we received under Cdbg. In about a month ago, we received a letter from the federal government saying that we will receive Cdbg Cv3. It's the third funding source under the CARES Act. So the third funding source, the $1,016,000 that you see down in the synopsis, that's what we're talking about today. And that's for public services and for tenant-based rental assistance. And any time that we receive funding, we have to go back and we have to reintroduce this information, and then we have to submit it again to HUD.
Just so I'm clear, the 250,000 that's here for small business, that's already got applications and will be allocated from this money.
Yes, so the 250,000, a portion of that has already been allocated and sent out to small businesses.
Right. But you can provide a list of those businesses?
That's correct.
And the remaining amount?
The remaining amount that we have, that's remaining from the 200,000 we have right now and the 250, we do have people that's already been earmarked for that funding.
Okay. So if somebody was to apply now, there wouldn't be anything there?
They could still apply. We do have funding available. We just have a cap at 250,000.
We have a cap at 250.
Mm-hmm.
And Mayor, Director, Vice Mayor Wyrick, the one thing to remember is that because it's CDBG money, there were certain restrictions.
Not just anybody.
And so it's I would call it a tedious process. We advertised it a lot. It was on our website. But you did have to provide a lot of information to ensure that you fell within the HUD guidelines. And so it's been a little challenge, but I think the businesses that we did award were very grateful.
Right.
But it wasn't really a citywide type of application process. It was really limited as far as income and other components.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
And just to piggyback on that, we did, like Bruce just stated, we did advertise several times for these small businesses to receive this funding. So it's a strenuous process that we went through to try to make sure that these small businesses receive this funding. And we did advertise, and then we made notice to each and every business that has a City of Business, Little Rock business license. So we want to make sure that everybody had an opportunity and knew about the actual funding. And we did receive a lot of applications. The first wave, we received 250 applications.
And I appreciate that. Something has just popped up that hit me that maybe they might be able to pursue dollars out of that. That's the reason why I was asking the questions.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Director Howard. Jamie, if you'll address item number 10, and City Attorney, you'll address item number 11.
If we could bring up the sketch map, please, and kind of let everybody see the area that we're going to be talking about? While she's still working on it, I can start kind of go over the preliminary stuff. So Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, Director Wright, this is an intent to zone the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Currently, state law allows a municipality within that extraterritorial to adopt and enforce two things. We can adopt and enforce subdivision ordinances, and we can adopt zoning ordinances within the extraterritorial jurisdiction. And that is to assist with the growth of the city and annexation. Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, we did go through and adopted the subdivision ordinances within the entire extraterritorial jurisdiction, but we only adopted it out west. In the southeast portion, and also this other portion that's on the sketch map, we only adopted the subdivision ordinances. So in that area, we do control subdivisions of land, but we do not review and approve zoning classifications. We do have a land use plan for intent of the use, but we do not control that. The only time that we control certain aspects of sites is there might be a few, and Arch Street and Dixon is one case where a couple sites prior to annexation entered into an agreement for extension of sewer that we was control the zoning of those properties, and we rezoned the properties by agreement, but not within the entire extraterritorial jurisdiction. So what this is a process to start of a process to do that. We have had several items that has come in extraterritorial that have had at the Archdiction where we did review it for zoning and use, but there's also others that if it's in our ETJ and it's not a subdivision, we do not review that layout. Adopting zoning in that area would allow that and allow that approval of use. So what this does is, first is we took it to the Planning Commission, and the process is the Planning Commission recommends to the board for the adoption of a resolution for intent to zone. And then after that, the process, we go through the land use plan in that area. We see if we need to change the land use plan. We present it to the Planning Commission. And we also reach out based upon city administration at that time to contact the area to notice them more than what we're doing in a resolution of the intent to zone. Last time that this happened, I believe mailers were sent out to about a third of the population in the area with the intent that they would contact others, and we also posted in the paper. That is a requirement. At some point in time within this process, we will post in the paper a map of the area that we intend to zone, and then based upon what the board or city administration requires, whether we hold public meetings in that area, that's up to the discretion at that time. Then we will come back before the Planning Commission and with the proposed zoning, and then the board for approval of the proposed zoning at that time for adoption of the ordinance to adopt zoning in that area. More than not, the intended zoning that we adopt, if you look in our ETJ now, we bring in as residential, R2. And that way when we go out there and somebody wants to develop it, because it depends on the majority of the land, and we may zone specific areas at a request by a landowner when they receive this notice of the intent to zone. And so that's what this is. This is just bringing in the rest of our ETJ underneath our zoning jurisdiction as the west side of the extraterritorial is.
Okay. I guess I'm slightly confused because I see the Pratt Road and Landmark and those names on the map, and I just really thought that that was in Saline County. And I guess I'm out on Pratt Road all the time, and I just really didn't realize that was City of Little Rock.
Well, what we can do is on this sketch map, it didn't really show the county boundary. We can actually, make it a little bit larger and put that on there so you can kind of see the location.
Well, I can see Pratt Road, and I see something that says landmark, because those are communities out there, as I thought they were. But yeah, I'd like some more information on that. Did you get any feedback from the people that live out there? Because sometimes people don't want to be under our zoning.
And from my understanding, speaking with people, our staff in the past, that was one of the reasons why this area was left off in the adoption of the zoning ordinances within this area. That was one of their concerns. They didn't want to, they was okay with the subdivision, but they didn't want zoning, in the area. And that may still be the case, but what I have heard over the past 2 or 3 years, especially the subdivision that's just north of that Arch and Dixon intersection, had some concerns over developments coming in the area that they implied and asked whether zoning, we can enforce zoning on the south side of Dixon, and the answer to that was no. That would fall back underneath the county jurisdiction at that time for zoning, which county does not, the Pulaski County does not have zoning jurisdiction in that area. And so I have received over a couple years just concerns of zoning in the area. And so this was an attempt to come back before the board and also the area to see if minds have changed, if we can adopt zoning in that area.
Well, I know there's some mobile homes out there, so, it can get kind of sticky with that kind of stuff. I'm just really surprised. I really thought that was out, but.
And as before, if these are adopted and the majority of it goes R2, and mobile homes is a good example that you're putting in, the minute that it's adopted doesn't mean that they can't have their mobile home on that tract of land. It just means that it is, at that point in time, legally non-conforming. So if anything is done to that land, developed, or if they want to bring in a different mobile home, if there was a single wide and they wanted to bring in a double wide, or they wanted to change the zoning of the land to be a mobile home park or that type of scenario, then it would have to go through the zoning process, the rezoning process.
Well, that's what people typically don't like. Now, there's a huge flea market out there. Would they be subject to this zoning?
If it was with that ETJ and they did not come before us and request that their area be zoned a specific, zoning, or through the land use review and the planning commission review and the board ultimately review and approval that we did not change that zoning to other than residential R2, then it would fall underneath that R2, which would be legally non-conforming. But that doesn't mean that through this process we cannot zone property what it is currently being used as now.
I can foresee all kind of problems. So why are we doing this now? What led to this decision?
Well, there
Did
were
something
several,
prompt you to do this, your department to do this?
There were several developments that come in out in the southeast that was concerns of neighbors and other people that were within the ETJ that are not within the city limits, that we did not have authority under zoning to review anything, only subdivision. So if it is a residential subdivision or a commercial subdivision and you are actually subdividing the land, we review it. But we do not have building permit authority in our ETJ, and we do not have zoning in that southern that is shown in that exhibit in our extraterritorial. So if a development wants to come in and the county does not have any review authority over the use of the property, we do not in that south portion. This, if adopted through the board as a ordinance, would allow our zoning ordinances or codes to be enforced in that extraterritorial jurisdiction. So if development comes in our ETJ, it would go to review and a rezoning through the planning commission and adoption by the board.
Well, Mayor, I'd like this to be held separately just in case somebody wants to, that lives in that area wants to
If you recall, some members of that area, we experienced this early, and Mr. Manager definitely helped me with my thought process. Early pre-COVID 2020, we had an issue, or definitely was fall of 2019, where really, those members of the ETJ came to appeal to our board due to the fact that some private businesses, it was
I recall that was across the street.
and so
in
this
one
is,
of the
this is
liquor
in response to be helpful to those community members, and so I don't think they will have an issue.
Well, I know a lot of people live
Yeah,
out there, because
yeah.
I'm out on Pratt Road all the time, and there's a big flea market out there. I don't, have these landowners been
This
notified
would
of this?
this would have, if those community members did not want, this would prevent that going forward.
Yeah, just remember, this is a resolution of intent
Yeah.
to zone. What that means is that allows staff to start the process of the reviewing of the land use, the notifications, that type of thing.
And just
It does
to-
not rezone the property as it is now. It is just doing an intent.
And so, again, this is in response because many of the community members, what happens is when there's a development that they disagree with, they tend to come to this board to plea at a last effort. And so this isn't a way to be helpful to those members.
Well, I recall the particular incident, and I know the subdivision, but I'm talking on further down. I mean, right now, with the fog that I'm seeing and with the red flags going off, I can't support this, because I just feel like people don't know what this is going to entail. And there are people that got a lot of mobile homes and things out there. They've got larger tracts out there. I don't even know if our zoning would even be of help to them. It'll help those particular people, but there are a lot of others out there that it won't. Mr. Moore?
This is very unique to this board, because even during my tenure, I don't remember going through this process, but the mayor and Jamie are accurate. This just states the board's intent to start the process. And so there will be many public hearings, and there's no timetable. There's not like, this won't be coming up to you anytime this year. So we will ensure that there's a lot of public input, making sure that everyone out there is notified. And you're right, people who live in the county,
They don't want to be bothered with that.
that's why they live in the county.
That's
I
right.
mean, but I do think this did come up, and we ought to at least explore it. And then at the end of the day, if the decision is made that they don't want it, then, I think we won't move forward. But at least this gives everyone an opportunity to voice their opinion.
Okay, but can we hold it separate, Mayor? Because I'm not going to
Yes.
support it. And if it's on the consent agenda, then I'm going to have to vote against the consent
Yeah,
agenda.
it's separate.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Next question.
I had a follow-up to Doris's questions. I'm looking at a really small little map here, but all of this is in the extraterritorial boundary. None of it's in the city of Little Rock.
That's correct.
Typically, when you bring things like this into the city, you bring them in at their current use. Like, for instance, if there's a non-conforming use, like Doris is talking about the flea market, I've been out there, it's a great place to go to. It could come in as a commercial, non-conforming use. You probably wouldn't bring it in as residential because it's not really residential. It's just a big tract of land with stuff being sold on it.
And he's constantly adding to it.
So that's kind of a statement. But the other part of my question is the zoning can be helpful, as you said, to other persons that live in the area. If there's something that's coming in that they really don't want, it's objectionable to their homes, their residences, things like that. So that's a positive for them. But can there be pieces of this that is left out as opposed to just throwing away everything and not moving forward with the zoning?
Yes, they can. I mean, just like in the 90s and early 2000s when this was adopted on the west side of the ETJ, we adopted the zoning. We did not do it in this area. So its entirety doesn't have to be. That would be part of that process to understand what areas we need to do and if there's opposition, or just like you was talking about for the flea market, that's a review of the land use plan of seeing what do we intend to rezone this property when we adopt it and bring it in as a certain type of zoning. If there's some uses that we don't want to change the use for and just leave it as R2, then that's an option too. So
And
everything.
it would be a non-conforming use.
Yeah,
if
it'd
it's
just
a
be a
business.
legally non-conforming.
Yeah.
So if there's like an intersection somewhere between two roads that may be considered collectors in the future, and they're all residential, we may want to rezone that area for what the land use plans are, and we may want to just bring them in as R2 based upon how far it is in ETJ and how long do we think development would go out in that area.
And so your plan for notification is just to send a letter out to all the property owners in the area? Is that?
Well, as Mr. Moore explained, I was not part of this process. A couple of our staff was, and at that time, we notified about a third of the people that was in there. But that would be really the notification process, the public hearing process is something that we would set through what the board would like to see, what administration would like to see. So, and there is no time frame, to get this done. We just need to make sure people are notified, and we do have the public meetings, and that we have an understanding of what the area would like to see.
And what does Pulaski County, what impact do they have on any of this?
As far as through state law, I might have to defer to the city attorney's office because we are given that right within our ETJ to do so. The county does not have any zoning jurisdiction in that area for that. If they were concerned about areas of development within there, we would need to coordinate and have input. So I think they would be involved in this and notifications and knowing what we're doing, and invited to all the public hearings that we would have, and be notified of such. Aside from that, I don't know how to explain if they wanted to adjust certain things. We would definitely sit down and meet with them on that aspect.
So they'll be involved in the process.
Yeah, because
Pulaski
even though
County
it's in
will
our
be.
ETJ, it is still within the county.
Yeah.
It's not within our city limits.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Mayor, I noted that he really didn't answer the question about the notification. Will all the property owners be notified? And can I make that request? Mr. Moore, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I think what we're hearing from Director Collins is before anything happens, there's a process. And I think we're thinking several steps down the road. And so the first step is an intent. And if anything was to happen at all, there are public hearings that have to be put in place and notifications would be made to those property owners. But as he shared, just like we did on the west side of town, to prevent certain things or not necessarily prevent, but to be aware of certain things that would happen in Roland and Ferndale and things of that nature within both particularly Director Hines' ward. Those things are in place. When we talk about the ETJ, it's just for the last several years when we hear the word ETJ, it's generally about the west side of town. And so now we're just literally, because there's things that are happening and we have to be aware, and so we have to put this notice of intent. So it's the same thing that has been done in the past. And
I
so,
know
yes.
all of that.
If
I own land out there, I want a notification from the city of Little Rock.
And you would
that
receive
you're
it.
getting ready to zone my property, because there is expense that comes along with that. We make it seem like it's easy to develop property in the city of Little Rock, and it's not. There are all kind of fees and everything associated with it that a person right out there now wanting to do something don't have that burden.
And there's no disagreement. I think, again, this is derived from when this board was approached by members of the community because things were going out there that we don't control. This is just a measure that if something is to happen that we are aware, because 9 times out of 10, they will, as Director Hines just whispered to me earlier, when something happens to them, they will come to the city of Little Rock, just like they have in the west side of town.
And I understand that, but why not just zone that area that they're concerned about?
Director Wright.
That's not possible.
Okay.
They want to be in the county till they don't want to be in the county.
Okay, we'll see.
Or they want the protection of being in the.
But I just feel like that's gonna be, it's gonna blindside some folks out there.
They want to be in the county till they want to be in the county, and if they can get shelter from our ETJ, they will try to call on it. So puts us in a precarious position, and the Pulaski County administration basically punts to us all that stuff. So they kind of put us in a rock and a hard place a lot of times.
And we're just putting in a protective measure for our city. And again, as it states, it's an intent, but we all respect and always want to go above and beyond in sharing communication. That's if this passes. Again, we don't have to do it, but we're just because it's happened already. If something else was to happen, people will come back to us. This is just a protective measure for the city of Little Rock.
Okay. Right now, I'm a no.
Next. I think we're good for this particular item. Any questions for items 13 through 17?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Item number 15, I'd like a presentation on that, please.
Mr. Collins, item number 15.
Yeah.
If we could bring up the sketch plan for that one too, please. Vice Mayor, I figured you might ask me a question about this one tonight. This site was previously zoned as a planned development. It did have in that planned development, there was a residential home portion, and there was also an industrial portion. The business that was there, they were a boring company, drilling company, and really used as primarily as as far as industrial goes, stocking of equipment, stuff in that area. What this applicant wants to do is to come in and rezone the property as a commercial. And since it is a planned development, now we're going to go through a planned development for commercial use. The single-family home will be removed. So right now, they're just going to, they're not going to use it as a residential property, so this is just straight commercial. And they do want to do, as in the application, minor auto repair, consisting of the tires, install brakes, oil changes, alternator, water pump replacement, et cetera, that type of use. They're wanting to place some storage containers on site to accommodate that, and they're also wanting to, and if you look on the plan, I don't know if we could zoom in a little bit on that one, there's an area that's kind of X'd off right in front of the building. That's going to be like a 30-foot awning extended onto the building for use. And they have proposed times of operation from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. There is a notice in there, and for me, I highlight it to show, because they do have what they call a consent towing permit, so they can tow vehicles that they're going to repair only, so it is not to be used as a salvage yard or storage yard of vehicles, and that specifically is in the planned development commercial write-up to do so. And so that's what they're proposing to request. The Planning Commission approved it. It went to the consent agenda. We did not have anybody in opposition to the request.
Okay, so is this, it's establishing a planned commercial district, right? It's not an existing planned commercial district.
It is, yes, it's existing planned development industrial. Because of that industrial use that they was using for storage of the equipment for that boring company. And so in revision, since it is a planned development, they could have went through a revocation process and then a straight rezoning process, or through this one, since it is, they could go as a revision to the planned development for a planned development commercial. They're essentially removing the industrial aspect of it, adding the commercial use for this auto repair business, and there'll be no residential component.
Okay, so we're not approving a planned commercial development, we're approving a change to the planned commercial development.
Yes, because right now it is current, so we're changing it from a planned development industrial to a planned development commercial.
Okay. I have issues with this. We have a beautiful apartment complex that's right next door to this property, and that developer, those folks have put tons of money into wonderful residential structures, apartments. They have plans for more. I don't think this fits into their agenda for good residential use. We have residences all up and down the street, some nice homes down there. This doesn't fit into anything that they're gonna want. The only thing that we have that I can remember that is not residential is the burial vault company right next, I think it's right next door. It's very close if it's not. I want to hold this separate because I believe this neighborhood group will not be accepting this very well. When the Wilbur Burial Vault wanted to make some modifications, changes, we spent hours working through what to do there. So I just don't think this fits the plan for Alexander Road. We have wonderful locations for fixing tires and whatever else you said in other places that are more fitting. They're more in a commercial area. This is not commercial. Granted, we do have a burial vault building location next door, but it's been there for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. So I want to hold this separate.
Mayor, well, the other item that I asked to be held separate, is that going to be held separate?
Yes.
Mr. Moore, because it looks like it might be on the consent agenda.
It's on the consent agenda because it was on the consent agenda, but you asked for it to be held separate, so it'll be held
Okay,
separate.
thank you.
Director Adcock?
Yes. Item number 16. Jamie, this says rooming house, boarding house, bed or breakfast. What do they want? And is this that old motel that's sitting there by the University Hospital?
No, it's not right by the University Hospital. It is off of Markham, just a little bit west of the interchange of Markham and Kavanaugh. Is there a site plan that's a sketch on this one?
Have you talked to the neighborhood association about this?
I have not spoke with them. The documentation has been submitted to them, notification of this. Let me pull up the item. We did get, there were two objectors for this item that showed up. One spoke on this item at the Planning Commission. Maybe pull up the zoning map to see if everybody can kind of get the orientation of where it's at. It's an older red brick home that is 2-story.
Has it been a single family?
It is currently single family. And they're proposing to stay on the property. They're going to live there. They're going to move downstairs within a bedroom. Okay, so now if you look over there, the intersection I was talking about is just a little bit to the east, to the far right of the screen. So it's right there at that Ridgeview Drive, Markham, West Markham interchange on the south side of it. Is there any pictures that's in what was sent to the board of what?
Catch 1 and 2.
Well, do we know if they want a boarding house, a rooming house, or a bed and breakfast?
Yes, what they're asking for, they're wanting to use it as a boarding house, 3 bedrooms, maximum of 6 people. They want to advertise to the professionals in the area, for the UAMS type area, to stay in 1 week to less than 12-month rental. Kind of use it also a type like a bed and breakfast type use of rentals less than 1 week. So the boarding style would be more of up to that 12th month, type rental. And also as the bed and breakfast would be just on a daily rental type scenario. So they're looking to redo the building, accommodate that type of use. They're going to move downstairs, potentially provide meal service, with whatever they're allowed to do with permits. We don't permit that type of, if they have any type of for meal service in there, that would have to be done separately. And then they got to accommodate some of the parking, even though there it is. It's, there's the lane that you're looking at right now is from that site sketch. It's that the east side, so you're right, or the east side of the building is what you're looking at. Markham would be to the right of the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Director Webb?
Thank you, Ms. Knight. I just wanted to say that I've been, every time I get this, I've been sending it to the neighborhood association. We obviously been meeting in the normal manner that we do, but they are aware that it is now on the agenda, and I've asked them for some specific opinions before next Monday.
It's separate?
Are you making a request, Director Webb?
Please.
What is the request?
I hold it separate as well.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Moving on, I believe anything for items 13 to 17. Well, let's do a recap of what we have held separate. We have item number 10 that will be held separate. Item number 15. Item number 16. Is there any other? I believe that's it. Just want to make sure. 12, 15, and 16 will be held separate. Board members will now do any questions for items 18. We know item 19 there are going to be questions, but for item 19 we'll have
I've got one for 18.
Director Linehan that will give a presentation on item 19. Director Adcock?
I have questions on number 18.
And the question?
I would like some information about what this money is being used for. Have we always spent this money and this is just to repay it? Or what are we spending $420,000, $27,000 for?
Mr. Moore, or
Maybe Mr. Carpenter.
And the city attorney.
Director Adcock, the AML defense program is the insurance pool that the city participates in, which impacts cases brought against the city for civil rights violations and for employment discrimination violations. We have an agreement that...
I'm sorry, I can't understand you.
My wife will assure you that it had nothing to do with the mask. Nobody understands me. The AML defense program is an insurance pool that the city participates in. It covers the civil rights cases that the city is a party to, and it covers the employment discrimination cases that are brought against the city. The civil rights actions, a covered case, if there is a judgment, pays 90%, and the city pays 10%. If in the employment cases, it's a 50-50 payment for whatever the damages and costs are. We went with AML many years ago when it was almost impossible to find insurance to help with these kinds of cases.
Okay, are these cases already cases, or are these cases in the next year?
This is in effect the premium to take care of 2021.
2021.
Right.
How much have we spent on these cases this year?
I don't know the actual number for this year yet.
Do we have that insurance this year?
Yes.
Then I would like to know how many cases we've had, what the cases are, and how much we spent and how much the municipal league spent on our behalf of this insurance.
I'd like that information as well.
I'd like it sent to all the directors, please.
Will do.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carpenter.
And so it's just civil rights, and you just named two types of cases.
Right, this is for civil rights and employment discrimination. We have another policy or another participation with them for automobile accidents. The cities of Arkansas are maxed at 25, 50, 25, I think it is, and in coverage, if they either have insurance, they have to pay that amount as a maximum. If they don't have insurance, they got to pay it anyway, so we participate with the municipal league in that pool.
I'd like for that information too, how many municipal leagues, insurance companies, insurance policies we have, what they've paid out in 2020, and how much it's going to cost us for 2021. Thank you.
All right, Director Linehan.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. We're going to walk through the board communication that was sent to you on Friday last week to go through the budget amendment. You'll recall that last week when we met, we also went through all of the revenues. So today we'll be handling that in one entry and then going through the expenditure side. So if you'll scroll down a little bit, we'll get to the top of the table. Yeah, that's good. So this is a summary of the adjustments that will be made to the general fund budget. We'll go through each of these. Each of the numbers here represents a separate adjustment to the fund. On where you see the general fund amendment, the total adjustment to the revenues will be the reduction of $8,086,000 that we discussed last week. And then the expenditure adjustments will be a reduction of $3,157,455. The net impact of that is a $4,928,545 increase to the budget, which offsets the adjustment that we had before. So our original adopted budget was $212 million for revenues and expenses. We adopted an amendment April 1st, 2020 that reduced only the expenses. This now takes care of the rest of that to bring it back into balance. So the balanced general fund budget will be $204,039,253, both revenues and expenses. And as mentioned, I'll go through each of these 7 adjustments in just a second. As we scroll down, you'll see the street fund portion of the adjustment. Here we have a total revenue adjustment of to the good of $102,700. We have a favorable expenditure, actually an increase in expenditures of $11,255 for a net impact to fund balance, an increase of $91,455. On the next page, at the top of the page, you'll see the adjustments to the fleet fund. The total fleet fund revenue adjustment will be a decrease of $496,360. There will be a net increase to expenditures of $157,640. So the net impact to the fund balance will be a reduction of $654,000. On the Vehicle Storage Fund, we're going to have a reduction in revenues of $354,522. We will also have a reduction in expenditures of $174,276, so the net impact to fund balance will be a reduction from the original budget of $180,246. But I want to point out that in the original adopted budget here, there was net income of $331,000. So this just reduces the net income to $150,927. Most of these adjustments, as we go through them, were primarily associated with COVID-related issues. But again, we'll go through each of them one at a time in just a moment. As we scroll down to waste disposal, we're going to have a reduction in revenues there of $334,298. We will also have a reduction in expenditures of $394,298. So the waste disposal fund will continue to be balanced with an amended budget of $23,604,307. And then finally, the last fund that we will adjust will be our parking garage fund. We'll have a reduction in revenues there of $523,993. We'll have a reduction to expenses of $499,387 for a net reduction of $24,606. So this will reduce the net income in the parking garage fund from $793,000 to $769,140. So there's 24 adjustments in all, and if we'll move to the next page, I'll begin walking through those adjustments. So the first is the revenue adjustment. We discussed this adjustment in detail at our presentation last week. We went through each line item, had a separate page for each of these line items, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this again tonight. But the total impact to the revenue for the general fund that is not passed through associated with the pension funds is the reduction of $7,929,122. The second adjustment is the portion of the general fund reduction that's passed directly through for the closed police and fire pension funds. So there's a reduction in revenues of $156,878, and that is offset by a reduction to the pension contribution of $156,878. So the net impact to the general fund of this adjustment is zero. The total of those two make up the $8,086,000 revenue reductions that you saw on the summary table. The next adjustment is on number 3. This is to adjust personnel cost for the COVID-19 reclassification of fire EMT public safety salaries to the grant fund to be offset by the state CARES reimbursement. It also includes savings associated with the health insurance premium holiday. You'll recall that we are going to utilize the savings by not making that payment in December. We're going to, in a later adjustment, transfer that to special project to hold to use for next year's 2021 budget, which will offset the impact of the 7.5% increase so that there's no impact to employees or the city. The other adjustment here associated with payroll, we have exhausted our vacation sick leave payout original budget allocation, so we need to increase that by $400,000. We have also met our vacancy savings goal for the year. So we know that we have an additional $500,000 in savings that we will achieve that will help to offset the increase there. So all in all, our personnel cost will be reduced by $8,520,946. Adjustment number 4 is a net decrease to our outside agency contributions. There's 3 items that we're adjusting here. The Arts Center increase of $200,000 partially restores the reduction that we made in the April 1st, 2020 amendment. The reduction to Rock Region Metro is due to COVID-19 revenue and expense reimbursements that they received directly from the federal government, and they passed the savings on to the member cities. So our share just for 2020 will be decreased $513,561. And then we entered into an additional contract with the Downtown Partnership for Maintenance and Safety in the downtown area, which added back $50,000 to the amount that we reduced in the April amendment as well. So the net impact of those adjustments is a reduction of $263,561. Number 5 is the operating expense adjustments in the general fund. The first is an increase. Our property insurance came, the renewal happened mid-year and the premium increased. So this increases the budget for the property insurance by $78,558. We increased the budget by $125,000, which is the city's share of the general election cost. We will not have to pay that bill until the first quarter of next year, but it's an expense of the current year, so it will be accrued as a current year expense. River Market operations, due to COVID-19 closures, will have a reduction in those operating expenses of $185,350. And then our police department had some legal fees and negotiated agreements with the Municipal League, and this is their share of that expense, $131,700. So the net increase to the general fund operating expense will be just under $150,000 at $149,908. On the next page, we're going to see our increase in transfers out. This is where we will make a transfer out to offset the COVID-19 expenditures that we have accumulated in a special project. There are $4,506,860 worth of COVID-19 expenditures that we accumulated as they were being incurred in a special project. This is a combination of the expenditures and the outstanding purchase orders and encumbrances. In addition, we've got a court-ordered attorney fee and expenditures that are being held on account during an appeal of $128,792. And then that health insurance premium holiday savings. This is the portion needed to offset the increase next year so that neither employees or the city will see an increase in the insurance cost in the or experience the increase in insurance cost in the 2021 budget. This will offset that. So in next year's budget process, you'll see the transfer back in from that special project to offset that increase. Number 7 is our traditional entry where we allocate the vacancy savings and the vacation sick payouts that we have experienced through October. And so on the next page, there is a table that shows how those adjustments are allocated. So the first column is the $5.5 million in vacancy savings that we've already realized through September 30th. Then the next column is the vacation and sick payout allocation of the $1,250,000 for a total in the third column. The original personnel budget for each of the divisions. Then the impact of the April 1st amendment is the next column. That is the reduction for the part-time personnel for the 120-day period that were not working during the COVID area or COVID time that those facilities were closed. You all approved that in the April 1st amendment. Then the health insurance premium holiday, and then the additional reductions that we did with the fire personnel cost. If you'll scroll down a little bit to where you can see the fire department, you see the $7.7 million reduction there. That's a combination of the CARES Act reclassification and the portion of the insurance, the fire pension cost that is being reduced. Right below that is the police pension cost that's being reduced, and the increase in the vacancy savings. So the personnel cost will be going from $158,717,000 in the original budget to $149,410,000 in the amended budget. But there is no impact of that allocation. Those were the items that were in the first two columns, the vacancy savings and the vacation sick payouts were included in the original budget. They've now just been allocated to the departments where those savings were realized. So now we'll begin our street fund adjustments. So the first is a reduction to property taxes, similar to the adjustment that we made in the general fund. This is approximately a 1% reduction in the budget, which originally anticipated a 4% increase. The state gas turnback, we're increasing the budget $275,000. Our actual experience has been better than what we had originally budgeted. And then there's a small adjustment to miscellaneous revenues. So the net impact is an increase of $102,700. The adjustment to the street fund personnel cost will be the 9th adjustment. That is to reduce personnel costs for the health insurance premiums that we will not have due to the health insurance holiday in December, $76,258. And then entry number 10 on the next page will be to set aside the health insurance premium savings to offset the 7.5% contract increase in 2021. Then we move down to the fleet adjustments. So we're reducing our fleet fuel user fee charge by $500,000. That's a revenue in the fleet fund because of the reduced fuel prices and the reduced fuel usage attributed to COVID. There's a slight increase in miscellaneous revenues. The net decrease to the fleet fund revenues will be $496,360. Like the other funds, the fleet fund will experience a reduction in personnel costs due to the health insurance premium holiday. So this will be a reduction to their personnel cost. Number 13 is a reduction to the actual fuel expenses of $500,000, their operating expense. And then number 14, the $654,000 was a transfer to a special project to fund police vehicle upfit, and it came from the accumulated fund balance in the fleet fund in order to be able to upfit our police vehicles. The health insurance premium holiday savings is also being transferred out to be saved to offset the 7.5% increase in 2021. The next adjustment will be to the vehicle storage fund. So here we are decreasing revenues, and these are all directly COVID related. The details at the top of the next page. Administration fees will be down $21,530. Storage fees will be decreased $238,116. Record fees have decreased $95,600. All of those are due to the traffic reduction during the stay-at-home period. We weren't under a direct stay-at-home order, but when all of the closures took place and schools were closed, there was a lot less traffic on the road, a lot less need for vehicle towing and storage and record fees. Number 16 is the reduction to personnel cost in the vehicle storage fund for the holiday health insurance holiday premium savings. Number 17 is the reduction to the towing expense because obviously there were fewer tows during that period, so $175,000 savings there. Number 18 is the transfer to set aside the health insurance savings to utilize in the 2021 budget. Number 19 is the beginning of our waste disposal fund adjustments. So the first item here, the reduction of $1.1 million to the landfill fees. I had a conversation with Assistant Director Ronnie Lowe today to get a little bit more clarification on this. So as you're aware, we've had a landfill cell under construction, and we're in the process of closing out one that was reaching capacity. Well, when construction was started on the landfill cell, they anticipated that it would take approximately 6 months to complete. But we had massive flooding, and then we had lots of mud, and then we had COVID. And then they found rock as they were digging out the new landfill. And so all of these things delayed the project that was supposed to take 6 months, ended up taking a little over a year. The cell just opened last week. So in anticipation, as the cell that they were closing was beginning to fill up or beginning to reach capacity, they wanted to ensure that they had sufficient capacity left for our residences and for the contracts that we have in place with some of the surrounding cities. So the haulers that dump or that bring things to the landfill on an ad hoc basis were temporarily turned away, sent to a different landfill in order to ensure that they had sufficient capacity for the contracts that were in place during that period. And so that, in combination with the activity during COVID, we're seeing a temporary reduction in landfill fees. That is partially offset by some insurance reimbursements that we've had, both at the landfill and for collections. Those are being increased, $371,800 and $615,320. Then we had a loss on some disposal of vehicles and equipment of $80,000, a small increase to miscellaneous income, and a reduction to investment income. So the total net revenue reduction will be $334,298. On the next page, item 20 will be a reduction in the personnel cost of the waste disposal fund for the health insurance premium holiday savings of $56,000. Item number 21 is savings in diesel fuel of $337,200, so this reduces expenditures there. And then item number 22 is the transfer out to set aside the holiday premium savings to use for the 2021 budget. Finally, we get to the parking garage fund. This is item number 23. So here we had an increase in our business license revenues. These were collected pre-COVID. These were collected by January. And our original budget was about $300,000 or so, and we ended up going over that to $320,285. And these business licenses are associated with rental cars that are dedicated to the parking garage debt service. The increase in street cut repairs, in the last year or so, we've had a lot of activity throughout the city associated with the build out of the digital capability for Verizon and AT&T. In addition, other utilities have been making lots of street cuts, and so our street cut budget has increased, partly also due to the ordinance that you all put in place last year that changed the penalty structure if things were not completed in a satisfactory manner or in a timely manner. Utilities are now catching on and are beginning to behave better about getting the roads repaired. And so we do not anticipate seeing such a heightened level of street cut revenues in the future. But in 2020, we are increasing the budget $300,000 based on actual experience. We have a decrease in our parking meter revenues, and this is directly due to the COVID closures and the suspension of parking enforcement during that time. We also have a decrease in the convention center and the surface lot parking of $329,478. Throughout the pandemic, the monthly parking contracts have remained pretty steady at about 90% of the original budget. The decline here is primarily the daily parkers and the surface lot parking. The same impact to the River Market Garage, a decline of $269,800. We're seeing that same 90% of monthly parkers, but a decline in the daily parking and any surface parking. So adjustment number 24 is our last, and in order to offset the reductions that we were experiencing in the parking and to ensure that we had adequate debt service coverage for our parking bonds, Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, who manages the facility for us, did cut a lot of operating expenses associated with the two garages. And so there was staff that was furloughed. Really, they allowed the monthly parkers to use their key cards to go in and park, but they really closed those lots during that time to the general public. And so there was no labor or management of those facilities during that time. So we had a reduction of $246,000 to the convention center parking operations and a reduction to the River Market parking of $272,000. We did have a slight increase in the property tax bill for the parking garages. That was an increase of $18,000 over the $140,000 that we had budgeted. So the net decrease to the parking garage expenses is $499,387. So again, I'll just refer you back to the summary on the first 2 pages, and you'll see the net impact to each of the funds. And I'll be happy to try and answer any of your questions. I also want to bring to your attention, I won't walk through it, but I know Director Campuris and Director Hines had asked for kind of a mapping of the grant fund monies and where that was going. And so I did prepare that for you, and I believe that Laura has passed that out. If not, she will be shortly. Okay. So are there any additional questions?
Did you get it? You got it? Yeah.
Frank.
Director Campuris?
Sarah, you do a great job.
Thank you.
And one thing that I would appreciate if you and Frank and Bruce would think about is if we could get these a little bit before and read them beforehand. You go so fast, I'm thinking about 14 and you're on 17, and then I miss 15 and 16 because I'm trying to figure out something before. And if I could have it a day before, sometime before to look over it, I'd probably make more intelligent decisions and I could make more pertinent suggestions. So,
Mr. Moore?
Dr. Pierce, I mean, this was sent to you all Friday.
I know, but I've been doing something else this weekend, but that's okay. But
I mean, anytime we've done a budget ordinance like this, and I mean, in years past, I mean, during the recession when we did 3 or 4 a year, but we typically they go out on the agenda that Friday.
As I said, there was other things this weekend going on, but that's okay.
But well, the good thing is, while we did send it this past Friday, the board still has a whole nother week to digest. And so thank you, Director Linehan and your entire team for all the hard work. I know this has been a challenging time in navigating through financial chaos, and the decisions that you help lead along with Mr. Moore and myself and the entire finance team to get us to this point, and all the department directors to even get us to this point from the previous budget amendment as we were preparing for COVID and to be in the midst of COVID. You are to be commended, and your team, I know you all have been working around the clock to get this prepared. So definitely want to share that appreciation to you. But for the board, we do have another week. My commitment has been that I think we've been discussing budget items really the whole month of October, maybe a little bit before, particularly with COVID-19. The latter part of September is that every Tuesday we will be discussing something about the budget. Clearly right now, we can't even get to the 21 budget, even though we're working on it, without having a budget amendment and ensuring that we remain steadfast in our fiscal stewardship. We have a balanced budget with this balanced budget amendment due to a lot of hard work of our financial team, and grateful for them. But we do have another week to digest this budget amendment. And so before it goes for a vote.
I want to refer you back to the revenue presentation that we did the week before, because again, I didn't go into another lengthy discussion on that, but that was covered in the first adjustment of tonight's agenda, but the details are in that PowerPoint presentation from last week.
And what we can do is, Sarah, if you, I guess Susan or Allie, if we can get that presentation from last week, and then maybe kind of put that in a PDF with the presentation that we sent this past Friday, and then have a double presentation that we send to the board that they have as well.
And then for the members that weren't here to receive the mapping document, we'll get that sent out to you too, so you can see how those funds interrelate between the general fund, the special projects, and the grant funds.
And I know this is a lot of information, so we want to be very clear. What you're being presented today in the budget amendment is a culmination and a compilation of both the revenue forecast that you received last year, not last year, last Tuesday, Director Linehan did a revenue forecast where it showed that we would reduce our revenue forecast by $8 million, and we showed the reasons why as a result of COVID-19 and the economic recession. What you've seen today is the matching of that revenue forecast reduction with our expense reduction to create a balanced budget amendment. And so while you'll see the revenue forecast that has all that detail there, you'll see the expenses in this whole compilation. And so really, I would be paying attention to what you were sent Friday this week, but we'll send you that information as well just so you have it. And then to not be confused, the grants is really just showing you the first in, first out, and how we move money from a reconciliation standpoint through GASB accounting and through how we fund things from our city ordinances from general fund, street fund, solid waste fund, and our special project funding. And so that's just a map and a roadmap on how we move the money around from a GASB accounting standards.
I do want to clarify one thing. So this particular budget amendment that is proposed for November 2nd, the general fund, the net impact of that is $4 million. Let me see here. Yeah, $4,928,545, which when combined, with the amendment that you made April 1st, brings the general fund back into balance. So that this amendment in and of itself is not balanced. It, with the reductions you made April 1st, balance the general fund budget. I do want to clarify too that if we had not had the CARES reimbursement for the public safety salaries if that had not been approved, then we would have had to make an additional $3,157,000 in expenditure reductions over and above what you had made in the April 1st amendment. So we had incurred additional COVID-related expenditures that had been made throughout the period that totaled $4,500,000, and let me see, that's on your adjustment page, it's transfer out. $4,506,860. And so that, in combination with the $3,157,000, brings us back into balance with the $8,086,000 in revenue losses.
Thank you so much. Director Adcock?
Yes,
And then Director Hines?
can you please tell the public where they can get copies of all three of these documents if they want to look at them?
Well, those documents are already online, except for this. We'll get this put online.
Okay, this one's not online?
Yes, the board just got this today,
Okay,
but we'll put that online.
but the one that we saw today and last week are both online?
Those were both on the board's agenda with those documents. They're out on the website with the board meeting documents.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you, Director Adcock. Director Hines, then Vice Mayor Wyrick.
Thank you.
I think I figured it out, Mayor. I was looking for an email, and it was actually in our agenda. That's why I didn't catch it. I didn't realize the detail that was in that write-up was there. So, thank you.
No problem. Vice Mayor Wyrick.
Yeah, I have to ask this question. With these reductions, is there going to be a level of service reduction that we're going to experience, and are we losing additional personnel?
There are no personnel reductions other than, we had the temporary part-time that was in the April amendment, but there are no personnel reductions of any kind in this amendment. And again, that's due to the fact that we were able to submit some of our public safety salaries for CARES reimbursement, which is helping to offset the impact of those revenue losses. Otherwise, we would have had to make additional reductions, but we did not.
And I would say we should thank the members of the Arkansas delegation that voted for the CARES Act funding, because we would have had to make we've already made very, very tough decisions throughout this year, and we've had to have workforce reduction this year. But if we did not have the CARES Act funding, we would have
We would have to done that. No service reductions based on where we are?
Not for the 2020 amendment. We're still working on the 2021 budget, so.
Thank you.
But, you know, again, our original adopted general fund budget was 212 million, and this brings it down to 204 million.
Right.
And so that will be the basis. The revenue adjustments that we've made here will be the basis that we grow from for our 2021 budget.
Mr. Moore?
I do want to just piggyback on something Sarah said, and obviously we've limited some of our recreational activities due to COVID. So when we say there hadn't been any service reductions, I mean, we haven't decreased any staff, but we have decreased some of our recreational, and I think it was the prudent decision to make, but I don't want people to say, oh, well, there were no service reductions, because there were. I am pleased that there's a plan in place to open up the Daily Fitness Center possibly in the next few weeks. We asked it, even though we won't have the threshold number for the ADH to have to approve it, we did send it over for approval. We're going to send it to Dr. Compuris. So we'll be very limited, but we get a lot of questions about that. But there has been some service reductions, but I think it was a prudent course too.
But not as a result of this amendment?
No,
It was already-
not this amendment. Most of
Correct.
those have been in place since the beginning of COVID, with the zoo temporarily closed,
Right.
golf courses, fitness has been closed, those type of activities that were suspended then. Also, just to give you a quick update, when we met last week, we had submitted our CARES application, and there were some questions that came back, but that application has been accepted. We've uploaded our reimbursement request, and so there are no outstanding questions. It's still pending approval, but everything has been uploaded for the reimbursement.
Mayor,
Director Wright?
when is the deadline for us to submit the rest of the CARES expenditures, or are we done?
We
We're
submitted
maxed
our
out.
maximum, and so we've done that. We still are completing some of the projects that we had begun initially, but we submitted our maximum reimbursement that we were allowed to the state with the salary, using the salary, public safety salary, which the 4.5 million we've spent on the other projects, that offsets that cost.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Linehan. And as we share, we'll be discussing the budget each Tuesday. Again, we just want to reiterate our appreciation to the finance team and all their hard work to get us to this point. I think, just to kind of reiterate, Director Linehan shared the basis for the 21 budget and understanding all that we're looking at from an economic standpoint will be the 2020 balanced budget amendment. And so we'll just want to, now we're still looking at other things, but that is our basis as we kind of move forward from that standpoint. That being said, we'll now move. Are there any questions from items 20 through 22? Seeing none. We'll now move to item 23. We'll add you don't see it here, but Allie will be adding there's a MHA consideration that we'll add to item number 23. And for the policy agenda, we really went through that, so we won't have a policy meeting today because Director Linehan gave us a lot of information to digest. And we'll get the grants document online from that standpoint. Our meeting's adjourned.
I had a question.
I didn't get a note, so, but we can entertain a question, but the meeting's.
But if I can just ask Mr. Moore, Mr. Moore, can we have an update next meeting about the large pile pickup? Are they being picked up by wards, by the list that you had, or how is the new vendor picking up the large waste?
Let me just clarify. We did put a bid out. We did not get a response or any responses, so we're regrouping and getting another one out soon.
The city's getting dirtier.
And again, if you all have individuals that you know that do this type of work, let us know so John and his staff can contact them. We set aside, I think, a fair amount of funds to try to get this pilot program going, and we didn't get any bidders.
I think the biggest problem is the vacant lots and the ends of streets, because people know they can just dump it there. And then, of course, on the city's part, you say if there's not water service, you're not picking it up. So I think that's where the standoff is the biggest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.